used in Gothic literature, and they are especially apparent in Moreno Silvia Garcia's Mexican Gothic.
Set in 1950s Mexico, Mexican Gothic follows Noemi Taboada, a seemingly superficial, upper-class young woman more accustomed to dances and cocktail parties than gloomy mansions. Her world is turned upside down when her father receives a letter from her recently married cousin, Catalina, whom Noemi has not seen since childhood. In it, Catalina begs for help, claiming that her husband Virgil Doyle is poisoning her and that she's being haunted by ghosts. Concerned, Noemi's father sends her to the remote town of El Triunfo to visit Catalina and investigate the Doyle family. When Noemi arrives, she discovers that the family lives in a crumbling English-style mansion atop a mountain, ominously named High Place. The home is cold, damp, and isolated, a decaying relic of colonial wealth. The Doyles live in near complete silence under the rule of the ancient patriarch Howard Doyle, a frail man obsessed with eugenics and the so-called superior Doyle bloodline. His son Virgil is handsome but predatory, and Florence, Virgil's cousin, enforces the family's suffocating rules. Florence's son, Francis, is timid and fearful, but he seems to take a genuine interest in Noemi. Noemi finds Catalina a husk of her former self, listless, paranoid, and haunted by strange visions. The Doyles insist that she's merely suffering from tuberculosis, but Noemi suspects something more sinister. As she searches for answers, she experiences disturbing dreams, mysterious injuries, and an overwhelming feeling that the house is somehow alive. Eventually, she discovers a horror beyond even her wildest imagination. The grotesque is a defining feature of Gothic fiction, distorting the boundary between beauty and horror. In Mexican Gothic, it appears in various interconnected ways that combine to create an atmosphere of horror and fear, leaving the reader unable to look away. The first place that the grotesque is clearly seen is in the Doyle family's horrific moral decay, particularly in the character of Howard Doyle, the patriarch. He is obsessed with maintaining a pure bloodline through incest, marrying his cousins and forcing his children to marry within the family. He does this to keep hold of the fungus's powers and maintain eternal life, driven by his belief in a superior race. Furthermore, he sacrifices the lives of countless silver miners to enrich himself and even kills his own first wife by burying her alive to act as a conduit for the fungus's power. His son, Virgil, inherits this corruption, attempting to assault Noemi multiple times and seeking to gain power in the same manner as Howard. Their actions combined create an intense feeling of revulsion and disgust in the reader. As Peggy Dunn Bailey observes, Gothic fiction depicts human beings rendered grotesque by their extreme and incongruous passions and obsessions as the ultimate source of horror. Howard and Virgil's obsessions exemplify this, showing the moral decay hidden behind ambition and desire. In addition, the physical decay of High Place symbolizes the Doyle family's moral decay. It was once a beautiful mansion, the picture-perfect model of an upper-class European home. However, neglect over time has left it a crumbling ruin, covered with living mold and overrun by fungi. This symbolism is a recurring theme in other Gothic novels. For example, Helmsing notes that Southern Gothic often features formerly luxurious mansions and plantations haunted by ghosts of a violent past. Similarly, High Place is haunted by the horrific moral decay of its inhabitants. Another area where the grotesque is evident is in the novel's pervasive physical horror. Much of this stems from Howard Doyle himself, amplified by Moreno Garcia's use of terrifyingly vivid descriptions. The clearest example of this is when the Doyle family drag Noemi to Howard's room after she expresses a desire to leave. There, the full horror of his body is revealed. His skin is grotesquely pale, his legs and lips hideously bloated and covered in black growths, and dark fluid drips out of his mouth. The scene culminates with Howard forcing that dark fluid down Noemi's throat, filling the reader with shock and disgust. A further example occurs when Noemi witnesses a woman giving birth in one of her many gloom dreams. The baby does not survive, and Howard carves its body apart with a knife, feeding its flesh to the other Doyles so they can bond more closely with the fungus. These scenes embody what Bailey describes as the literary grotesque, incongruous, abnormal, monstrous characters, situations, and events that heighten literary tension and shock the reader to their core. Through these depictions of moral, physical, and bodily decay, Moreno Garcia uses the grotesque to expose hidden corruption beneath the surface of civility and beauty. The true horror of High Place is not its ghosts or its fungus, but in the human characters, revealing that the most grotesque monsters are not supernatural, but human.
Another prominent theme that is expressed throughout the whole novel is the idea of madness. The theme of madness expressed in literature focuses on the detachment of reality as well as the psychological mental instability characters experience. It can also be portrayed in literature as emotional extreme or distress and irrational behavior. Madness drives the plot and tension in the story, pushing it towards a climax. Quoting Lars Bernstein, who wrote Narrative Threads of Madness, he writes, "Madness can signal a heightened emotion, characterize, or climax. Madness can be a decisive factor in the creation of a narrative interest. This theme all happens psychologically, playing with the mind that explores the conflict between reason and emotion while showcasing the darkest side of human nature." In Mexican Gothic, the theme of madness is portrayed in various ways, but I'm going to be talking about how Silvia Moreno Garcia relates madness with the roots of the Doyle family, including their house, madness that messes with the leading character Noemi, and the madness Silvia Moreno Garcia places in the stories with different symbols and motifs. Madness within the Doyle house, this including the family and the house, is showcased as a symbol of decay. This madness I am talking about comes from a character that acts like a god in the story, Howard Doyle. His obsession and madness to defy humans' natural limits and living through his descendants is seen as a physical form of his decaying body. His maddening idea of wanting to live forever, and his son, Virgil Doyle, as well as his family becoming a superior race, infects himself physically, but he detaches himself and becomes a living form of madness. Through Howard Doyle's maddening obsession, it affects not only himself, but his family and the place he lives in, High Place. This is expressed through the book by a written letter to Naomi saying, "The house is sick with rot, stinks of decay, burns with every single evil and cruel sentiment. I have tried to hold on to my wits to keep this foulness away, but I cannot. I find myself losing track of time and thoughts." This quote directly talks about the house being a reflection of the manifestation of madness that comes from the insanity of the Doyle house. The surrounding of High Place also plays a key role, as the house is in isolation from any town or city, making this place that is isolated that breeds a place for its inhabitants to go mad. Another aspect that showcases the madness experience in the novel is within the leading character, Noemi. This madness she experienced becomes a psychological game as she spends more time at the Doyle house. In the beginning of the novel, Noemi is portrayed as a character who is grounded, knows what she believes, and is motivated by going to school. When she arrives at High Place, she is met with many unusual and supernatural events that blur her line between what's real and what's not. An example of this is when she first sees Catalina and rationalizes that she is just terribly ill and nothing supernatural could be happening within the letter that she had sent previously. As more time goes on, Noemi encounters visions, dreams, and the gloom that is found out later in the story that confuse her more, descending her into madness about what's going on inside the house and what's going on inside her mind. A quote perfectly describing this is from Waldemar Krasinski, The Minimus of Madness and the Semiotics of the Text. He says, "Madness unhinges and disfigures the productive legitimacy of the text. Madness disrupts the instinct of conversation of language." This quote is connecting to the idea about how madness causes confusion, disorder, and chaos. Later on in the story, when Noemi becomes infected by the mushrooms and realizes what she's been going on in the house with Howard Doyle and his family, the madness she experiences causes her to rebel and reveal the hidden truths behind the house. This is evident when Noemi pieces together all she's been seeing in the house and tries to escape it once and for all. As Noemi's madness drives the plot, it also drives her to find the truth behind the different characters like Ruth Doyle, Howard Doyle's wives, Benito, and herself that she sees throughout the story. Ultimately, the madness Noemi experiences drives her to the revelation and self-discovery overall relating to the ultimate theme of adulthood. Finally, as Silvia Moreno Garcia is writing her novel Mexican Gothic, she explores the theme of madness within the different motifs and symbols appearing regularly in the book. This first symbol I want to explore is the Doyle family symbol. This symbol looks like a black and silver snake tangled and eating the end of its tail. It is said in the book that this means the infinite above us and below. The symbol relates to the cycle of death, rebirth, life, and forever. Repeat. For the Doyles, this is reality as Howard Doyle keeps living on through his descendants, letting his physical body die and letting his soul move on to his son. This cycle connects again to the Doyles of self-obsession and eugenics, eternal life, and fungus. The symbol relates to the themes in one woven with madness. As the Doyles' obsession and madness leads to their own self-destruction, the snake as well tangled and eating its tail foreshadows the maddening end of the Doyles family and how they are in a complete cycle in the story of madness all around them. Another symbol that directly relates to madness in the story is the overwhelming amount of mushrooms Noemi, the lead character, sees. They are involved all over the house, outside the house, and even in Howard Doyle's body. As mushrooms in real life form on dead or decaying substances, this is exactly what is happening to the Doyles as they become maddened with the ideas that Howard Doyle is and how they view him as a god. Another way mushrooms symbolize madness in the story is when Naomi is infected with them, she begins to see visions in the supernatural, which in sometimes real life can happen. And as talked about before, they blur her mind as she descends into madness. Overall, madness is woven into all parts of Mexican Gothic through the main family, the Doyles, and their house High Place, as well as Naomi's perspective as she encounters the supernatural in the story, and finding all the Easter eggs and motifs Silvia Moreno Garcia adds in the story, representing madness that further move the plot.
Yeah, so fear is an element of Gothic literature that's often used in extreme measures to show our deepest and darkest fears as people. In the novel Mexican Gothic, fear brings out the real person, and it does in Gothic literature in general, but fear strips away appearances and shows people for who they truly are. In Mexican Gothic, Noemi's courage and intelligence truly surfaces in her fearful moments. She's introduced as spoiled, shallow, she plays around with boys, she parties. She's not someone who's good. But once her life is at risk and she's truly fearful of Virgil, Howard, the Doyles in general, the gloom, she shows courage by shooting Virgil. And she also protects Francis and Catalina in the process. Fear becomes the force that brings out who she truly is. Novak writes in one of his articles, "Demons in Gothic fiction represent a sudden revelation of the uncontrolled forces of the mind as they are reified in the seemingly ordered real world. And Gothic fiction uses these shadows and demons as a way to show fear in a natural environment. The demons represented by the evil Doyle family are evil forces that live as a shadow in the ordinary world. The Doyles have caused great harm to the world in general in their horrific deeds, such as killing a bunch of Mexicans, showing that they are truly shadows in the world." Second of all, fear causes despair and loss of hope. The house, High Place, a symbol of fear, literally feeds on terror and loss of hope of its victims. As people give up and succumb to the fears that High Place elicits, the house and its head, Howard, gets stronger through the fungi that's feeding on its victims. And its victims are despaired because of the fear that Howard and the Doyles put in to their minds. Novak explains this concept when he says in one of his articles that horror reveals the physically horrible and revolting against a far more terrible background of spiritual gloom and despair. In Mexican Gothic, the shadows, represented by an eternal gloom of consumed souls that were tortured and despaired to the point of being consumed by the fungi that made Howard stronger, shows the main character, Noemi, strong visions and dreams throughout the day full of just despair. Howard means to despair Noemi, and give herself up to the family by letting the fungi consume her mind. The Gothic genre thrives on this hopelessness and despair of characters because it relates the reader to the actual character. And characters often give off despair when they're feared into giving up. So although fear can empower the brave, like my first point, it can also suffocate the weak, like my second point. Imagine this. You're going camping at night and you hear something outside and you go and you take a look and you just see this vast forest. And the blackness of the trees is like a frame to just black, just darkness. But there's something beautiful about it, the way the moonlight flickers on the trees and the mystery of it all. You want to go into that forest. And this is a weird thing in Gothic literature specifically, because for some reason people are drawn to fear. Novak calls this concept the grotesqueness or disturbed imagination, delight in the ludicrous, and fear. And it's something that really defines Gothic literature. Fear doesn't really make sense. It repels, but it also has an attracting factor. In Mexican Gothic, Noemi is drawn toward danger. Despite every warning, with many opportunities to leave and get out of town, she stays because she is, in a sense, obsessed and fascinated with Catalina, as well as High Place and all the mysteries it holds. The sublimity of High Place keeps her there. This is made obvious by her strong sexual desire for Virgil. And the author shows that Virgil rapes and harms Noemi in her dreams. However, she starts to seek that and describe that as something she wants. Noemi's fascination with High Place and the Doyles mirrors our own encounters with fears in the world.
As we finish our deep dive into Mexican Gothic, we hope that you can more deeply appreciate and analyze the literary genius of Celia Moreno Garcia. Each theme we explored today revealed a different aspect of Mexican Gothic.
First, we explored how the grotesque exposes the Doyle family's moral and physical decay, and amplifies the novel's physical horrors.
Then we took a closer look at how madness lies at the root of the Doyle family and how their house, High Place, is a representation of it, as well as how Celia Moreno Garcia utilizes the theme of madness throughout different motifs and symbols in the story.
And last but not least, we looked at fear's role in Mexican Gothic. We looked at how fear reveals a character's true nature, the despair behind fear, and sublimity, being attracted to fear. These elements are not only present in Mexican Gothic, but also throughout Gothic literature.
We challenge you to look for Gothic elements, such as the grotesque, madness, and fear, not just in other works of literature, but in real life as well. In the same vein, Mexican Gothic remains relevant to this day because its themes are still present in everyday life. We might not have an unkillable god to fear like Noemi does, but we still experience fear in our lives. We might not be going mad from a mysterious fungal network, but there are still times where we think irrationally and don't act like ourselves. Even if exaggerated, there are still things we can learn about ourselves from stories like this, and that's why Gothic literature is valuable.